So how the pipeline looks like, what we do for you. Okay, we're collecting our images. Let's go immediately to integration that we process scattering profiles for each image. And obviously we, as already Rob showed in the scatter, I will go a little bit more in details. We define the buffer regions. Each dot is one frame. Okay, this is the intensity of the SAXS for the frame. And then we have a peak, and then we have some small proteins on the end, and another some baseline after the side exclusion peaks. And so then we're using scatter mostly to subtract and define the buffer region, and that's what we're doing for you. So you already got the scattering profiles for each frame, but you also get the final curve for the peak. In case of splitted peaks, and especially when we see that the protein complex have some kind of transient complexation in this case, that you have first peak and second peak, they are overlapping each other, we are not doing this kind of deconvolution for you, but I will show what is possible to do. But we at least give you information, the scattering profiles for the front of this peak and scattering profiles for the tail of the peak. So sometimes we're sending you out the sample 1 front peak, sample 2 tail peak. So this is done. And together with the MOLS data, I'm gonna skip this. This is kind of more advanced. And I want to show you how the package looks like and what you're gonna get when you receive the data. I mean, I have some examples here. Okay, let's get, I talked about it on our weekly webinar / meeting. So this is how the package looks like. You can find it in your subdirectories, in your home directories on the server, and you can take it from there to your own computer. It stays there forever because those packages are not big. There are no raw images involved in it. There are the raw data. We're not talking about that. And so what you see there are subdirectories to 0. This is the name of the lab. And 0 means that's the BSA. For each user, we collect the BSA. And then we have sample 1 and sample 2. I think that's clear. And in this case, you can see these are SEC file. It can be directly uploaded to the scatter 4. But you also have, in this case, 2 data files for the sample 1 and 2. So most likely these are peak, front, and back. I'm changing the name sometimes. But before you look at this report and you look at your data, the final merge data, those are the .dot file here. I will highly recommend to look at the report for the MOLS. And that's, again, huge thanks to Daniel. He find a way how to fast way to take the software that we use to analyze MOLS data. And so when you look at that, so what you receive here, and my computers get very, very slow when I open this for some reason. So let's say the sample 1, Bustamante 1, and that's just some aggregation. You can see it in the signal of the light scattering, that's the red line, and then you have some separation of the main peak, that is 2 peaks. And then you have some small molecule floating outside, okay? So that's already information how the size exclusion UV signal and light scattering signal and reflectivity index looks like. And obviously, this is not the interest. This is aggregations. This is in the void, but this is probably the peak of interest. And we calculate the molecular weight. So first, before you do any processing further from the data what you get, look at this PDA file, and if the molecular weight that is estimated from the peak, it's something what you expect. And all the other statistics is below that you see is about 80 kilodalton large protein. If you expect that, you're on the good side. And then, just for interest, how the sample 2 looks like. Okay, you see it's probably already the complex because we see another part here. That's probably the smaller protein. This is some larger protein. And still have the aggregation present. But that's why we do size exclusion. Coupled sucks that we try to separate those aggregations from the and molecular weights are definitely from 80 to about 95 kilodalton. Okay, so all this information that's before you do some data processing. So that is in your package. If you really want to reanalyze the data, and I will show you some example. There'll be some question about how to deal, like how to look at the data that you get and how to process this further. And I think it's a good scenario now. Before I go to present my own science, I'd rather go and repeat what Rob already did it for a very simple problem. But let's do it for much more difficult problems that normally people sending us. And so I prepare here, this is the SEC file, so we can go straight and upload it to the scatter. And so this is how it's look like. You get this SEC file too, as you see. And so this is our, you see obviously here, we have some aggregations. We can confirm that, look at the PDF file, and I need to know where is the PDF file for, oh, here we go. So look at that PDF file now. Okay, so these are the aggregations. This is the first peak that is split in 2 peaks, and then we have some smaller peak in the bag. Okay, this looks very similar to what we see in a size exclusion SAXS signal. This is a SAXS signal. So that's what we have. We confirm that we have a splitted peak and some smaller peak on that. Okay. So now, what already Jesse, I think Rob mentioned a couple of times, when we have a higher concentrations, we have this capillary folding. So when you can see the background before the sample and after sample are different. How to deal with it. And now I recommend, if you really want to subtract and your protein of interest and peak is this first peak, you should really take the region of the buffer subtraction before the peak rather than after the peak, okay? So we clear this, and we're gonna select the buffer, set the buffer, and update it. And take a couple of seconds, done. And now you can look at that and zoom in the peaks. And so I'm showing this very difficult problem. Okay, I'll do it again for some reason. Okay, so this is our peaks, and I already, Rob mentioned using this similarity map to really select the region where the most cyan color is the very similar region. Okay, we got some similarity here, and I can call it, let's say, Hammel 35P1. That's how I call those samples for you. You can click the merge here. Okay, when you select the second peak, okay, the most similar sampler here, it's the region. And if the farther you go from the buffer selection, you will see the more of you have this artifacts from this capillary folding that I mentioned. So you already see it for this very small particle right here, you see it more. How to deal with it. And so again, in this case, what I will do if you want to redo your buffer subtraction and merging what you already have it from us, you just clear the buffer and select the buffer in the bag and update it. And for this peak, in this case, the closest buffer is not this buffer before capillary thread, after the capillary pooling. So that's the easiest way to deal with this problem. There are other tools that can be used, but I will not go there today. Maybe tomorrow we can manage that. Okay, so now we have, you see a little bit less of the problem of the capillary pooling, and we can call it peak 3. Okay, so that's been done, and as you already know, okay, sometimes Scheduler try to tell you it's aggregated, don't use the 120 points, forget that, ignore that, just go back and you can look at okay. So you kind of see that this is quick analysis, but it's important as I didn't really do a good job to select the buffer region, but somehow get the idea that you confirm the reserve duration with the opinion plot. These are very simple approaches, but I will try to explain that how it is important to analyze the data. So this is last peak for the smaller peak. So what to do now? And there was a question how to go further with this and how to apply a simple modeling tools. And I think Rob mentioned that we can go directly to calculating the shapes. But let's do it now, and I will show you how to confirm what is what. If you have any information about the crystal structure, etc., 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 if you don't have, let's look at the spec again. This is my last peak. Let's look at the structure of the last peak. That thing that is leaking from the complex, and we don't know if it's leaking that part A or part B. The simplest way to do it, it's just using Fox or Chrysal, but I will show you Fox, the simplest way that we can do. So Fox is our web server that is able to compare the data with the crystal structure. And so we know one of the particles that we have in our solution is this protein. And let's say another particle, prepare a little bit archive here, is this one. So we have a tool and they make a complex. That's what we're expecting. And we want to see if this peak in the back, which one it is. Is it the first one or the last one? So what I will recommend, we take all those PDBs that I expecting have in our solution, if we know those, and do archive or zip them, and just put that together. And that's where you put your zip PDB files. And in case of the data file, you go to the data file that you just merged, and we call it peak 3. I think so, Hammel 5 peak 3, yes. And put it right here. We get the advanced option for now, and we just submit that. If we're submitting it, you take all those PDBs and give you a score, a goodness of fit for each data. Okay, so this is your PDB, and I go back. Okay. So this is PDB. Obviously, the PDB have 2 particles, so they're not fitting well. So you don't want to do that. So it's not a dimer or whatever it is right here. That's asymmetric unit. This is a monomer, and it seems better, but still we have a chi about 7, which is pretty high. And this is the second particle, what's supposed to be in the mix, and obviously not fitting our data at all. So this is a very simple test if you know the structure of the protein. And one of our attendees have a question, how are we gonna deal with the modeler? So most of the crystal structure or cryo-EM structure are missing regions. And as Greg mentioned in the first introductory, whatever you put in a solution, it's scattered and it will be seen by SECS. So you need to be sure, and when you look at the PDBs, that you have the entire molecule rather than only what you see in a crystal structure. How to deal with that? It's very simple to do it the modular way, and I will just focus it. This is the PDB what we crystallized, and as you can see from our just really fast test, this is the fit. It's okay, but it's not the best, especially in a small Q and high Q as well. So why it is not the best fit? Because there are missing regions, and we can easily model it by adding with the modeler, and the modeler is existing as a plug-in for Chimera that I like to use. And I will, as fast way, I will show you how to do it. So we open the sequence for this molecule. Okay, this is the sequence. And when you select the sequence, you see there are some residues on the beginning, on the end are missing. So by simple way, by action, you go here, and in a structure, I'm sorry, it's here. In the structure, you can select modeler, and just one model is enough. You need to have a license key. I think for academia, it's for free, so you can request it. All missing structures, and you apply it. And in a few seconds, you will see a final model that is fully up with all the missing regions. And I already have it ready for you because it takes 2 or 3 minutes. We don't have the time to wait. So this is how it looks like. Okay. So you see those added regions. And you look at that fit, how this full sequence PDB fit the data, and obviously that's right here. It's improved from 7 to 3, but there is still something not right. And so you really want to be right, and you want to produce a nice fit to the data. You are okay to use the Bilbo MD. And Bilbo MD is a very simple tool, okay, that can be used to adjust not only unfolded regions, but adjust generally the movement of domain to the domain. And I will show it very briefly just for this case that is very easy to use, and you can extend it for multi-automarization state or for beats on a string structures that you move your domains around random way, and each conformers is it's matched and compared to our experimental data. And based on the goodness of fit, you select the best fit, or the Bilbo MD selecting the best fit for you. Or ensemble, that's mean multi-state model. If you want to know how it's being done in details, you can read about that. And I think this is a paper that we published with Dina a long time ago, and I think I can put it, I'll tell you how the Bilbo MD works and how it's selecting the subregions, and I can put it in our chat, but I can't find the chat right now. There is a chat. Oh, here's a chat, yeah. Okay, so let me do a brief introduction to the Bilbo MD, how to move domains and how to move the linkers and optimize the fit. So you can find the Bilbo MD on our homepage. That's all of the tools that we have. including uploading the scatter. So it's under the SAXS, and then you have a SAXS frame slice, mailing page to you get a scatter here, and a BuildByMD. Start new job, and we can call it whatever, LS workshop, and you're uploading your PDB. And it's going to be the PDB that have the entire residues. That's the ITS6, that's the PDB code full. And you can put it right here. Oops, didn't work out. One more time. What's wrong? Yeah, now it's working. Important is to create const file, and that's basically define which regions you're gonna move. And now know the first 6 residues are not seen in a crystal structure, and the last 20 residues are not seen in a crystal structure. So this basically shows you the cartoon, what is basically rigid and what's gonna be flexible. And when you hit done, and you can produce multiple domains that move. When you click on new domain, it's allowed you to produce different domains that are gonna move. If you have a multiple chain protein, or you need to enter the chain separately, and again, it's everything described in details in the publication, but it's also kind of intuitive. This is a very simple case, and the simple the better for very limited time that we have. And so then I take the dot file and upload it to the dot file. That's right here. Conformational sampling, the more per RG, the more conformers you have. So if you have something very large with multiple domains and long linkers, I recommend you do 600 or 800. This is a very simple case that I want to move only the linkers and optimize the fit to the SAXS data. RG min and max mean, that's again tell you something how far the linker is going to be extended or compacted as the MD simulation is producing. And so the best way to really optimize is when you look at the peak 3, what is the RG? RG is about 24 angstrom, because we are in the UK or US, so we're using angstrom. Be careful about that. So let's say your experimental RG is 24, the minimal RG will be about 20. This is rough estimate, and you can go as high as, let's say, as 40. So your experimental RG will be 50, you wanna go from, let's say, 40 to 90. And also depending how much flexibility you expect between those domains that are moving. Don't forget sending your email and you're submitting it. So that will produce multiple conformers, and each conformer is going to be tested against the experimental data, and also a multi-state that we select in case you have excessive conformational sampling, but excessive flexibility, that multiple conformers are required to match the data. So that's where the BuildByMD is very useful. You do a bunch of tools and you can read about the BuildByMD, what it's doing. I don't want to go there right now, but what I want to show you, when you look at the final best fit conformers, in this case, it wasn't the best fit, but let's bring this. Okay, this is model panel. And I'm going to upload and so in this case, this is a BuildByMD optimized and slightly optimization of those extended linkers. Obviously, this is very simple case, but the same stuff can be done for multi-domain proteins. There been a question how we just calculating shapes. I think Rob mentioned it very briefly. I will show you that it's really indeed possible doing with a scatter. You don't need to use our application and cluster that we have here. So they will be the same thing as the modeler plug-in camera. The modeler is only adding those loops. The Bilbo MD is allowed to do a multiple domain motion when you have, let's say, domain A and B are connected with the linker, or you have a dimer of something, and then extended domains are from the dimer. So you can do complicated systems that can move around, and the modeler is only adding those missing pieces to the structure that you have. You can do it in a COOT. So again, this is an example that you barely can see, but let me try it. So this is a figure from the input of the modeler. Then you have multiple domains. It's a trimer. It's a heterotrimer, and then you have domain 1, 2, 3, and that this is how the input looks like. And you can find it in the publication to guide you a little bit how to make these very complicated const files. But basically, what if you have this const file right, the const file is starting and minimize the structures. But in the structures that we had, there all these loops are missing. And so we use the modeler to enter those loops. And the Bilbo MD was used to basically fit the data with multiple conformers. Each conformer is plotted here. And the multifox that I want to show you now, it's allowed to select a multi-state. In this case, this complex of XRCC4 and ligase 4 to fit the data properly. As you can see here, it was required to fit with a compact structure, but also with extended structure. This is a very simple conclusion, but it shows that indeed we have a solution state that required a flexibility of the ligase, move around the scaffold protein, what is the XRCC4 domain, XRCC4 protein. And so that can be done in one step on a web application. And you can see it's doing all those calculations now for you. I choose only a very simple case where only the linkers are moving. No extra domains being added because this was just for part of the time. Oops, sorry. Okay, so let's go back to our case, what we started. We just kind of drive away, and this is back to our case. We remember this complicated size exclusion profile with aggregation, split two peaks, and the last peak and small molecules. So let's just calculate shape for these guys. I already confirmed, and again, when we look at the Fox fit, this is right here, that this is the molecule that is at the small peak rather than this one, okay? We improve the fit a little bit with Bilbo MD. The improvement from 3 to 2.8 is not very significant, but it's good enough to tell you in this case there is not so much to really improve with the movement of the linker. But when you move into regions and domains, you really can improve the fit dramatically with the flexibility of the domains. Okay, so let's prove if the sketcher can do that. And now we have this peak here, and this is my PRR function. And again, Rob will disagree with me, but I just cut the data by 0.26 over 0.3 to really get the PRR functions right, because all those extra points, first of all, you see barely some signal here for this very small peak, but it's give you a rough estimate that indeed your molecule is extended. And again, why it is so extended here, this PRR function have this elongation. Obviously, your very long extension is coming from this 25 residue sticking outside that you can see in a PRR function right here. So that's pretty much what we can say. And before I'm gonna calculate shape through the scatter, I wanna be sure that in my settings, I have the ATSA directory. And indeed, the ATSAP 3.3 is able to talk to the Mac somehow. So you can add a 3 bin file with what you add there. And your working directory could be right here. That's okay. And what is important, you calculate the PRR function. It's right here. And what I like to do is to refine. And when you refine it, somehow, magically, the scatter produced the GNOME output file. Great. It took me a long time, and there was a discussion before that. Maybe Rob don't know that, but when you tip to refine, the GNOME output file is produced. That's a good news. I think it's work also with the new version of Scatter 4. It's also work when you type to file, and you just type the name, and let's say this is Hammel 5p3 PRR function, and save it. So, and then you go to the model, and I run it to be sure that it's working well. And so you select your, okay, so write this one. You have a refine and you don't have a refine one, so let's use the refine PRR function dot out. That's the GNOME output file that is required for running Damin and Gaspers, and you can choose. Okay, I was running this Damin here over the lunch break. Let's make it simple, just one run without averaging, but you really require at least 7, 11, or 17 models that can be averaged together, because the models they're coming from the SEC-SAXS envelope reconstructions are not unique, as discussed by Greg in the introduction, because we're losing lots of information in spherical averaging. Okay, so now symmetry allowed you, if you know that your symmetrical molecule is symmetry or there is no symmetry. So in my case, I'm using the P1 symmetry. It will be fast, I'm using the Damin, and I just run the one run and start. So, okay, so this didn't work out. Let's do 7. Work before lunch. Okay, maybe you really want to.
It says it can't find the out file.
Yeah. I got that. Yeah, so I think let's use the one that worked. This one. So I think it's also the way how do you save it. I mean, but it's a good tool when you don't want to go between these two packages and you want to stay here. We have an additional tool that you are okay to use on our server. It's part of our mission, provides you for all types of tools. So when you go to the SEC-SAXS and you are a SIBYLS user and collect the data or our Beamline, you can upload all those files, but you also restricted SEC-SAXS web apps. You basically have Gaspers, Damin, etc., etc. So you can also use the Gasper. You enter your email, your GNOME output file. They need to be calculated in the GNOME and older version because I never update this, and residues number, etc., etc. So what you get in the final, after everything is done, you can go to your working directory where everything is running and look at your it was running before.
It's still running.
Oh no, it's regular. Sorry, I got it. This one. It's still running, and you got to find a PDF, PDB, and this is the older version that I run over the lunch break. And you got a dump field PDB and all single PDBs right here. They are superimposed on each other. In this case, I run 7 models. We have a bunch of statistic here that we don't want to detail right now. And then you can open the PDB. The downfield PDB is basically the averaged one. It looks like this, but if you run it as a sphere, show new selection, show. So this is how it looks like, and surprising to everybody that in this case nothing special to see here, but it's really show you that it's really work. Let's show it in a sphere. Okay, so on the right side you see the crystal structure. Okay, so when you look at the crystal structure versus, so you see obviously there is some elongation in one way, and then you have some extension. Nothing special. I mean, it's work. But again, you've done all this work just to confirm that this peak here is not the molecule A, but it's molecule B. And what you kind of need to appreciate the fastest way was just taking the PDB and compare the molecule A and B if you have that information, and compare that this molecule is not fitting rather than this molecule is fitting right. And it was much more faster and much more precise in this case. And you can optimize even the details like extended linkers. Okay, I remember there have been also some questions, and I really going from back to third, but now we have this case that I want to go back again and really look at the point of interest. What is this peak, or basically splitted peaks, okay? So how am I gonna deal with that? Again, so I can select that, and again, in this case, I'm gonna clear the buffer and select the buffer here. Update it.
Do you think it would be worth trying to run that on a different column?
We are on the way to do it because on SuperDAX, there is not a splitted peak. This is problem with the SHODEX sometimes. We have a high pressure columns, but it also tells you the complex is very transient, it's not stable. And so we want to separate those anyway. So, but on a SuperDAX, there is no split at all. It's kept together. And in our SHODEX column, we see the split, and we see it also in hydrodynamic radius and light scattering as well. So there is indication that it's not a stable complex. Anyway, so what I want to show you, not talking about the different columns, talking how to analyze this data. And we already did it. So these are the differences between those two peaks. You can look at the moles, and you will see that peak 1, the cyan versus blue is a peak 2. They have a different molecular weights. It's 110 versus 170 kilodalton. And when you just calculate the PRR function, I mean, let's go step by step and look at the normalized Kratky plot. So obviously, what is something bigger, smaller, sorry, and it seems like the larger particle is very transient and have some problem, as well as discussed. But Kratky showed that it's folded. It's not really too much to say about unfolding. Unfortunately, the larger particle could be slightly seems more unfolded, but it also may be potentially a little bit more elongated. And that's exactly a very difficulty sometimes to say if this difference between large, what is a cyan, versus smaller complex, if it's indeed it is the elongation or it's the flexibility or unfolding. So in this case, you can go farther and calculate some pure raw functions. It's confirmed that the maximal dimension and elongation, how it change. So that's the peak one, that's the large one. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is another bug in the scatter. So let's, no, it just don't allow me to select, calculate pure raw function from first 2 points.
From what?
You see.
What do you do?
No. So you see this? It's not allowed me to go the first point. It's just automatically truncating.
Huh.
But I have a different version of scatter, so forget that for now. And so we're gonna upload this in a different version. Okay, this is scatter 4, but it's a little older version. So we're gonna take those 2 peaks. Where was it? It's this one. Peak 1 and peak 2 right here. Okay. I apologize, the color is gonna be different. I'm gonna extend the colors. So we see the dark blue. Okay. So in this case, he allowed me to take the entire curves. Obviously, there are some from the beginning. Rob showed you how to define the Dmax automatically. I'm kind of old school guy, and I truncated the data. And I think there was a question how much I can truncate. Okay, from the Qmax, if you calculate the pure raw function, I really recommend you can truncate to about 0.3. That's most of the pure raw calculator. It's a gift or it's GNOME, or it is any type of methods that Rob is using here in the scatter. So you basically see the smoothness of the pure raw function, the better. And you already kind of distinguished that if you extended the Dmax to some maximal value, like in this 200, it's not right. And when the pure raw function hitting the 0 at the y-axis, that's where the pure raw function is supposed to end. And so this is about 125, 130. Let's try this way. Okay, we can extend a little bit.
So you're using the SPI method, which has no regularization in it. It's
yeah. I will
unbiased as it can get.
Yes. Unbiased as it's get. So there is regularization in L2 form, but Legendre have more regularization and make the pure raw function much more smoother. What Rob mentioned, regularization, it's basically distinguish noise in a curve versus a signal, and using this so-called indirect Fourier transformation to not overfit the noise with these bumps, what you see here. And in case you see these bumps, you have a problem with overfitting, or kind of in this case, underestimating Dmax. So again, we can extend it a little bit. Okay, so indeed it's not 200, but it's about 140. And again, well, this is a good start, I think so. And so we have at the front peak and the back peak. Obviously, the first peak is the larger particle, that's the blue one. And the violet that I'm gonna change to cyan now, that everybody can see it. That's the cyan. You like that color? It's a nice one. And so molecular weight from the moles tell me the difference is 110 to 170. Can go now and confirm the molecular weight in a SEC-SAXS. And don't take me wrong, Rob, but I really prefer using ATSA package to define the molecular weight from the SEC-SAXS. How much difference between RG real and reciprocals is acceptable? Wow. Okay. So in this case, I didn't click on RG. So we need to go back, okay? That's probably what somebody, who was it? Andy, okay, Andy. So we need to go here and properly calculate the RG. Okay, this is wrong because we have the coupler falling, so we got to cut the data as much as we want, and it's linear. Okay, then you see, I cut 20 points, and then I get rid of the problem with capillary falling. So don't worry about in this case, it's a small particle, it's less than 200 angstroms, so we have plenty of points at the beginning. We don't need those. Just most importantly, we know it's a size exclusion experiment, so this needs to be linear. Second part, we look at that too. And the scheduler is getting better to estimate how much you need to cut it, so I really appreciate the work what Rob put the statistic in it. But it's still, I mean, I can get rid of those 2 points on the top. Why not? Okay, and now when we look at the pivot function, the RG is 36.7. In this case, need to be improved a little bit. Okay, this one can be a little bit smaller. Okay. So in this case, we have 35 as a 36.3. I mean, that's a very close RG estimation for this.
Well, it's less than 10%. Right?
It's less than 10%. The same is 41.8 versus 41.1. It's definitely less than 10%. So we're good off. I mean, this is a solid RG calculation. But what I want to show here that already here in the Pura function, before calculating shapes, and you can also go and do it and calculate the shapes for this Pura function. You already see there is a second bump in that first peak, and that's indicate there is some molecule and the oligomerization state change, not only based on the Pura function, but based on the molecular weight that being confirmed by SAXS and by moles. I showed a report previously, but I don't want to go there again. So I will bring the primers, just only show you because it will be not fair for our users to not show that there are tools in the primers that are available and a fast way to calculate the molecular weight. Or just at least confirm what you see in the moles. And that's what I do as well very often. So here are our 2 peaks on the flight. And there are a type of analysis, it's called molecular weight. And he defined the result durations. Okay, I'll wait. I'm gonna extend it, be sure. There's still some kind of here. Okay, now we have pretty linear. It's just calculated falling on the beginning. And by clicking next, you have estimates from Porot invariant, from VC, what Rob was talking about, and another technique called MOW. I don't want to go there now, but they are all about 160 to 170 kilodalton. And so the average or estimate in this case is 170 kilodalton. I would do not use the size and shape molecular weight for several reasons because it's not work for elongated unfolded particles. But all those 3 can be kind of give you a rough estimate where you want to go. And especially the Porot invariant was, or Porot volume that was used to calculate this molecular weight, cut the data in Qmax by 0.17. There's several reasons for it because the Porot region is going only to 0.2, 0.18, but it's still close to others. So that's a fast way to just get an estimate for the molecular weight. What about the peak 2? That's the smaller particle. Next. So it's 110 kilodalton right here. So very fast way, but look at those. You confirm that moles molecular weight are right, and the SAXS confirm basically the molecular weight that we see in the moles. However, what our problem is here, and I mentioned on the beginning, and how much time I have, right? He's probably not there anymore, but
He's sleeping.
You got till 3.
Okay. Well, I just really want to go to the deconvolution of the size exclusion. I think that in one of the questions from the users that raised the hand. And I think I covered the ab initio shaping a little bit, show a little bit Bilbo MD, and also Fox, how easy it is to calculate scattering profiles. Okay, so let's go to deconvoluting and this very close peak. Robert Rambo said the port volume tends to overestimate molecular weight. It's kind of the upper limit. I agree with that, but it's still a rough estimate. And comparing the VC versus MOW, it's a good case. Maybe we calculate the molecular weight in the scatter. Okay, so how to calculate the molecular weight in the scatter? Yeah, talk privately to Rob. Sorry, Gandhi.
What? I didn't say anything.
There's a question about how do you calculate molecular weight in the scatter.
So just if you guys want to know, we didn't mention this, but we do have a YouTube channel where we have previous tutorials as well. And there is a section on there about the molecular weight specifically.
And I learned something new. I didn't know that the MOW version is based on the Porot invariant, what is very good to know. I used, when I was young, it's 20 years ago, I used only Porot invariant to calculate molecular weight. But I'm happy that somebody pushed it to the next level. And I read that publication. I think I reviewed that publication. Now I know more about this. Thank you. That came from Rob. Okay. But let me just go for those users that have this very complicated problem. Let's bring it up. Let's bring the new version of Scatter 4 again. Sorry for that. Okay. Now we have this stuff right here, and we can upload the SEC file to our scatter. Good. So we clear the buffer that was used for the second peak, and I'm gonna make it bigger so everybody can see it. Okay, and select the buffer and update it. Okay, and so this is my peak of interest. Okay. Okay, so obviously I have those two peaks here that I merged in this region and this region. But what you can do, you can unclick this averaging button and define for each frame a one scattering profile. And when you have a multiple scattering profiles in this larger region, you are able to deconvolute if the peaks are very close to each other. And I will show you that. Let's just focus on this region of the split peaks, because this peak is very far away from that region here. And I do not expect that this small molecule really interact with this problem here. So what you can do, you can select the region that you're gonna use for deconvolution. I think it's gonna be right. And say, whatever, Hammel 5 frames. And when you hit subtract, it show up. Okay, so my computer's a little slow now, so I'm gonna close these pieces here. Okay, so he will produce a bunch of frames. Each scattering profiles, let's kind of see reproduce 2-second exposures across the size exclusion illusion. In this case, I bring the raw. Okay, I have it already here open. And raw, as Jesse already mentioned, have this capability to deconvolute using SVD. Think about the convolution. Different components from the signal that may overlap each other. Okay, you see COVID-19, that's what we're working on now with Greg. So there's a bunch of COVID-19 in my in my files, but let's go to our cases. And here we go. I think it is somewhere here. Yeah, those are the frames that we just produce. Oops. Here we go. Frame 389 to 449. And when you hit here the plot series, what you're gonna see basically exactly what we see in a scatter, but we're just focusing on that split peak. And in this case, you can go to the series and click with the right click, and it took me at least 3 days to recognize that. You can go to several type of processing. LC series analysis is exactly what I did in the scatter, so I can go straight to the EFA, and luckily the scatter, ignore this, they say okay. Luckily the scatter is talking now to raw, and the 5 format is identical, very similar, so they can go back and forth without any issues.
What was that LC? What was it?
The EFA before didn't work very well because the scattered frames that I saved wasn't able to read in a raw, but now it's not a problem. So that you don't know probably, but before there was, I need to change the names, headers, and stuff like that. Anyway, so what I want to say, he upload those, and you immediately recognize there are 2 components. So these are the SVD single value components values, and see the first and second are very significant. The third is very, very minimal, so let's forget that one. At least could be because of capillary folding, so we have a little bit different background, but let's just not focus on this third one and say, okay, I have 2 significant components under these splitted peaks. And so what I can do now, I say, yes, it's 2. You can change that to 2. It's already 2. And hit next. And now the EFA, what is evolution factor analysis, we want to see that the single value of number 1 and second component start somewhere and end somewhere. And so in this case, we need to help him a little bit. We know the background is the green one. That's the component number 3 that it's not significant. And it's also end somewhere. So probably here. It's just a little help from the friend. And then we click the next button. And what you immediately see, he will distinguish there are this component 1 and 2 under the splitted peaks. And and you will also see the mean error rate for each frames when you're using those 2 scattering profiles that he extract from EFA analysis.
Why is the LQ kind of weird looking?
This is because I wasn't really paying attention to the buffer subtraction. It's a capillary folding issue, so forget that for now. We're focusing on the blue one, and we can cut the data anyway. So let's just forget that. But what is really important to see that you can also play a little bit with the range, how far you think, and based on this fig here, the chi, you want to be as smaller as possible. You can distinguish what region you want to take in account for the component 1 and 2. Okay, and for simple way, what I want to show you when we compare these scattering profiles with our just simple merging under the peaks, they are significantly different in a small q, what is very important. So if we really believe in this, that there are 2 components under the splitted peak, and we can deconvolute it with these two scattering profiles. You hit done, and you go to the manipulation and say, I want to save this frame or component 0 or component 1, and you hit save. So because I can save it here. Because I'm really used to work with the scatter much more than with the raw. All what I did here can be done also in the raw, but I really like to make Rambo a little bit more famous than he's right now. So let's just use the scatter again with the component 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 2. And compare that with our simple merging and see how different those peaks are. That's a peak 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, this is 1 and 2. Let's just compare peak 1 first. Okay, so this is another problem with the scatter. So
What happened?
now it's just automatically selecting and delete the points when you think it's aggregated. Just forget that. But that's
the auto RG.
Yeah, auto RG. It's just you don't allow you to take those data anymore. It's like no. You say no. It's like yes, I need those. And I say no. And so that's the like no, and the code is going back and forth. You know, like auto RG versus.
You could turn auto RG.
Yeah. Well, I need to do that, but sometimes, Happy? Okay. So when we compare those scattering profiles from SVD, what is the pink one versus the red one? We need to scale those because they've been. Okay.
Hit the ratio button. Hit the ratio button.
Hit the ratio. Wait, I don't gonna hit the ratio button now. Okay.
It's right there. It's right there. Right above the SVD button.
It's pretty similar for the peak 1. Okay. That surprised me when I did it last time. It was absolutely not similar. It was changed a little bit. Scale and plot the peak 2. But let's make a significant difference in the peak 2. Because the peak 2 obviously is affected by overlapping the larger particle. And so that's why it is important sometimes that this difference is what you see, especially here, is due to that this larger particle overcome the smaller particle in the second peak. And so sometimes this EFA analysis really help you to deconvolute, especially peaks under the multiple after the splitted peaks.
Right, but wouldn't you say so? You have these two curves. Wouldn't every point in there now be a linear combination of those two curves?
Yes, that's what I was doing in raw, as you see here, and that's what was the major. Go very fast. That's linear combination of each curve. This blue one and the orange one is a linear combination, and they are contributing so much to each curve in the elution profile. Yes, but what I want to say, when you just simply merging this region, you got a different scattering profiles that is slightly affected by so much percentage of the larger particle. Do you understand? So that's why it was helpful to do that. And now when we just compare not only radial durations, okay, so this one, now we need to calculate the radial duration properly. Okay, that's the radial duration without and after SVD. So 31.7 within 35, and obviously the PRL functions are significantly different with and without deconvolution. Okay, so this is it. Rob, I know you're not a really big fan of the EFA. I'm not using it for peaks that are really close to each other or you cannot distinguish it. But if you have a slightly separation of the peaks, multiple peaks under the size exclusion, I have a cases, especially this one, when I can confidently say this is a very, I would say, a transient behavior, but there are only particle A, larger complex, and particle B. If you have something that is very dynamic, it's much more difficult, and I would never use it. But in that case, the separation of the peaks don't work well. And sometimes it's very hard to find a column or technique to really separate those particles.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's worked and help us to define the proper Dmax for the 110 kilodalton complex. And I don't want to go, we know the structure of this, so we kind of confirm that the Dmax is supposed to be about 95 or 100 rather than 120 or how far you go. I mean, obviously you have this influence of the larger complex here. Before I go further, I will probably go to the chat room and see if there's any specific questions. Rob, you're writing a lot. Well,
Yeah,
other people
I would just like to add to this whole process for everyone who's out there to state that from the beginning, the evolving value decomposition
volume factor analysis
assumes that there's a scattering curve that's going to be most prevalent in the beginning and is going to diminish with elution time. And it's going to transition to something else, is the sort of benefit of this evolving factor. And that's different from the standard singular value decomposition, where no transition, you're not taking sort of the elution time into account. You're just feeding it all the scattering data all at once. And it's just saying that there's so many basis sets that explain everything. So it's using the structure of the data that you're going to have something coming in to begin with, and then that's going to decrease and something new popping in and increasing and then decreasing again. So that's one major difference.
Yeah, that's a very well said. I like that.
So I built something similar into the new scatter, but it's going to be thoroughly tested before I actually release it.
Again, I have cases when I merging the peaks that are close to each other and EFA, they don't have exactly the same scattering profiles. That's just test case that it's really not distinguishable. In this case, you see this first, it's not so much effective with the second peak because the scattering profiles are close identical. Okay, I'm going to show it again. This is it. Those are SVD versus just simple merging. So obviously, just the longer tail in a larger particle overlap with the small particles. Anyway, this was very advanced, but I think we have 10 minutes for hot questions. Not used, Rob, you can talk later. Anybody have a specific question, or we can show something what haven't been shown? And again, we do our weekly Zoom meeting, so there will be more questions can be asked. But this is now the question to ask. Okay. Where is the best beamline to collect BioSAXS data? That's a good question. Where is the best beamline to collect BioSAXS beam? I personally believe it's SIBYLS for several reasons. Because our beam is not focused on very small spot, and so we try to kind of preserve and not aggregate it, let's say not burn the sample in a short time.
How big is the beam?
We still have about 1 millimeter to 0.2, 0.3 millimeter. It's more than 1 millimeter, but 2 to 1 millimeter. But it's still big in comparing to 20 micrometer of APS, what Jesse mentioned. 20 to 4 micrometer with this probably same flux. So I would say the problem with the aggregations at those beamlines for biomaterials need to be addressed and solved to be done. What does it mean if the molecular weights are too different from each other according to different calculations? That's a good question. So I showed the primus, and they have been used the MOW, the porous volume, and volume of correlation calculation. If they are different, you still need to acquire about 10% error for the molecular weight calculation from the cells. It's getting more difficult if you have unfolding regions. And if you have unfolding proteins, it's closely impossible to define accurate molecular weight. So what does it mean? It could be the flexibility unfolding problem, that your molecular weight, or your radius of duration is not well defined because you have aggregations. And partially, some of the techniques are not weighting so much a small Q region as the porous volumes do. And the volume of correlation is somehow crossover in between. So it's a really good question. You need to watch out if it's unfolding, or it is a problem with slightly aggregated samples that can cause the difference between those three techniques that are in a primus.
Yeah, so the MOW method and VC, those are going to be very sensitive to the quality of the buffer subtraction. If you look, they went all the way out to like 0.3 inverse angstroms. And so if you have over subtracted, under subtracted, that's going to affect the mass estimate because it's off of a calibration. Whereas the poroid method, if you remember, it went out to about 0.17 inverse angstroms. And so, the quality of the buffer subtraction isn't going to matter as much.
Yeah, it is as well, yeah. Susan had a good comment, and I will probably mention that. Our size exclusion SAXS mail-in moles wasn't all the time perfect, and some users had a complication to really subtract the data because our baseline was drifted based on a temperature of the hutch. And so we kind of sorted it out. As you can see in this case, our baseline became much more flat and everything seems nicer. But there have been cases last year especially that you had a hard time to really subtract your peak because of fluctuation up and down as the AC was on and off.
Okay.
So we switch it off and we have just drift up would have different than the capillary falling. So capillary falling and problem with the drift of the beam that your beamline have too, you show that in your case too. There's a slightly problem with this drift in the beam caused the problem. So in this case, you really want to cut the data as much as possible. And what I recommend, subtract here. Let's say do a subtraction here of the buffer at the end and compare those curves. Let's do it right now. We update that.
How long is the run? Is that 30 minutes or is that an hour or something?
It's a 25 minutes, yeah.
25 minutes.
25 minutes. Yeah. computer is super slow. Nope, it's done. Okay, let's take that peak right here. Okay, peak 1, buffer after, and just compare those. Okay. And when you compare those two, oops, scale this. So this is when you're playing with the buffer subtraction issue. In this case, you really need to be careful when you cut the data. And also, and so you're welcome to cut it as much as you want, as much you want to be sure that you don't have a problem with drift or with those funky data on the top. In this case, we are allowed to do that because we have so many data here that we never use, especially for something what is 120 or 200 angstrom large. The rule is the 2p over the d max need to be smaller than the q min. So that's basically the rule. And I think it will be also okay if the scatter have that when you calculate the PRR function, you tell you that your rule is not filled up or it's not possible to calculate Dmax for if you cut too many data from the human.
So Michal, sorry, could I just ask for a clarification? Are
Yes.
you saying that I should create two curves, one where I subtract the buffer before and one where I subtract the buffer after, and where they differentiate is where I should be cutting off to?
That's the safe way. I would
Okay.
say yes. This is when
Okay.
you have plenty of time. If you really want to just be fast, what I recommend as well, just click here the Guinea plot and see where it starts to be linear. You understand? Again, so I will show it on this case scenario. Okay, this is where I take the buffer after, and obviously there's something wrong here, okay? But I know it's a size exclusion, I don't expect aggregations. So I just basically take those data out, and I still have a nice linear Guinea. This is the fast way. But if you want to be sure, you're exactly right. Before and after, I mean, or okay, here is already tried to be a problematic, okay? So first, 15, 16 points can be deleted.
Great. Thank you.
That's the fastest way.